At 14 years old, Ethan carried an unusual maturity for his age on a bright autumn afternoon when he was walking along the bustling main avenue of the city. His attention was drawn to a rather uncomfortable scene in front of a local restaurant, famous for its homemade dishes outside the shop. An elderly couple, dressed in simple yet clean clothes, faced the stern gaze and harsh words of Rick, the restaurant owner. Rick, a burly man with a voice that resonated power and impatience, made grand gestures that sliced through the air like sharp knives. "I will say it again, if you all cannot pay, then eat elsewhere. My restaurant is not a charity, but a business," Rick said, pointing threateningly at the couple, causing them to shrink further with every word uttered. Evelyn, the white-haired woman with tear-filled eyes, tried to explain. "Please, sir, I swear we brought money. It must have fallen somewhere. Give us a little time to look for it." Henry, standing beside her with an old hat and trembling hands, rummaged through his empty pockets. Desperation grew on his worn face. "Maybe it fell out when we got out of the taxi," Evelyn whispered, her voice weak with worry. At that moment, Ethan was struck by a surge of justice and compassion. He stepped toward the group, his youthful presence contrasting with the tension of the moment. With surprising determination, he interrupted the heated argument. "Sir, this is not right. You cannot treat them like this. They are elderly and clearly did not mean any harm," Ethan said, facing Rick with a resolve that made the man hesitate. Rick, surprised by the interruption, turned to Ethan with an expression of both irritation and contempt. "Who are you? Their lawyer? Don't meddle in matters that don't concern you." "Kid!" Ethan ignored Rick's tone and continued. "I will pay their bill." "How much is it?" His heart pounded rapidly, yet his voice remained calm and decisive. Rick's expression softened slightly as he saw an opportunity to resolve the situation without further complications. "It's $25, Rick said as he folded his arms, watching Ethan pull money from his wallet. The couple looked at Ethan with a mix of gratitude and surprise. Evelyn, with tearful eyes, took Ethan's hand. "Oh dear, you didn't have to do that. We will find the money. Don't worry about it," Ethan said with a gentle smile. "Consider it a gift. Sometimes, everyone needs a little help." After paying the bill, Ethan helped the couple leave the restaurant. In his mind, thoughts swirled around the birthday gift he intended to buy for Alice. He knew that the money he had just spent was meant for the gift, yet something inside him told him that he had made the right choice. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to face the consequences of his kind act, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and perhaps even disappointment. The morning light filtered through the trees along the road as Ethan slowly walked on the sidewalk, heading home after a sleepless night. He had spent the entire evening pondering over what had happened. Although he knew that helping the elderly couple was the right thing to do, he couldn't shake off the worry when he thought of today, the birthday of Alice. For the past month, Alice had been constantly mentioning this day. She had spoken of it with dazzling excitement, as if it were the most important event of her life. She had meticulously planned a garden party, twinkling lights, cheerful music, and of course, special gifts from her loved ones. And now Ethan had nothing. The money he had intended to use to buy a gift had vanished when he decided to help the impoverished couple. He did not regret his action, but that did not make his situation any easier. Alice had great expectations, and he did not know how she would react when she found out that he was empty-handed. He had thought about borrowing money from his mother, but she was also struggling with financial issues. He had considered selling some of his personal belongings, but time did not allow it. And now, with the party only a few hours away, Ethan had nothing but a heavy worry weighing on him. Alice's house was a small mansion located in an upscale neighborhood. When Ethan arrived, the party had already begun. Long tables covered with white cloths were set up in the spacious garden, laden with abundant food and colorful glasses of fruit juice. Bright balloons hung suspended from the tree branches, and a group of Alice's friends were laughing beside a small swimming pool. Alice stood in the center, looking stunning in the sky blue dress she had mentioned to Ethan earlier. Her face glowed, and her eyes shone with anticipation as she saw Ethan walking in. "Ethan!" she cried out, running to embrace him. "You're here!" "I always hoped you'd be." But as soon as she released him from her arms, her eyes immediately scrutinized him. "So, where is my gift?" That question made Ethan feel as if a cold breeze had swept over him. He licked his lips, his hand clenching tightly as he struggled to find the right words to explain. "Alice," he said softly, "I need to talk to you. Can we go somewhere else for a moment?" The change in Ethan's tone caused Alice to frown slightly. Yet she nodded and led him away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the garden. When the two stood facing each other, Ethan saw in her eyes a mix of curiosity and a hint of worry. "What's wrong, Ethan?" He took a deep breath, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. "Alice, I couldn't buy you a gift." Her expression changed immediately. The anticipation turned into confusion, followed by disappointment. "What do you mean?" Ethan knew he could no longer avoid the truth. He recounted everything: the elderly couple, the way they were treated unfairly, his decision to help them without considering the consequences. But when he finished, instead of empathy, Alice merely looked at him with cold eyes. "So, you took the money that was meant for me to help some strangers?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, I know that may disappoint you, but at that moment, I couldn't stand by and watch them be mistreated." Alice folded her arms across her chest, her posture stiff. "Ethan, I understand the need to be kind, but today is my birthday. You know how much I've been looking forward to this day. How could you think it was okay to show up empty-handed?" Ethan bit his lip. "I didn't want to hurt you, but what?" "Ethan?" Alice interrupted, her voice rising. "Did you think I'd be touched? That I'd be happy because my boyfriend didn't care about me on the most important day?" Ethan felt all the eyes from the party beginning to turn toward them. A few of Alice's friends whispered among themselves, glancing at him with curious eyes. He tried to remain calm. "Alice, I didn't mean to hurt you, but sometimes there are things more important than gifts." Alice laughed bitterly, her voice sharp as a knife. "You really believe I'll agree with that?" Ethan said nothing. He looked into Alice's eyes, trying to find a hint of understanding, but all he saw was hurt and anger. Alice continued, "Ethan, I can't be with someone who doesn't consider his girlfriend's feelings. Someone who puts strangers before his girlfriend on her birthday." He swallowed, his voice deepening. "Is that really what you think?" Alice nodded. "Yes, and I think it's best that we end things here." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there with a heavy heart. He had lost Alice, the person he thought would understand him best. Ethan walked slowly along the long street, the streetlights casting a faint glow around him. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel regret, but he felt empty. He had done the right thing. He knew that. But why did his heart ache so much? He thought about Alice, about the memories they had shared. The times he had taken her for walks under the moonlight, the times they had laughed together in a small roadside cafe. And now, all those things were nothing but the past. He sat down on a stone bench by the roadside, watching the cars glide by in the night. Perhaps, sometimes, doing the right thing does not mean it is easy. Perhaps the price of kindness is losing those whom you hold dear. But no matter what, Ethan did not regret it. He knew that in a world full of coldness, compassion is something that money cannot buy. And he would never trade it, no matter how painful the consequences might be. Ethan wandered through the city streets with no destination in mind. He didn't know what to do at that moment. The breakup with Alice still lingered in his mind like an unhealed wound. Her final words still echoed in his head. "You can't be with someone who doesn't think about the consequences of their actions. Someone who puts strangers before his girlfriend on her birthday." Ethan took a long breath and looked up at the gloomy sky. He wondered if his decision had truly been right. He had helped the elderly couple he barely knew, but the price he had to pay was too high. Losing Alice, losing her trust, losing someone he once thought would understand him the most. He felt lost amid the crowded city, where everyone was busy with their own lives. The noisy streets, the brightly lit shops, the hurried people passing by, all made him feel invisible. But then, as he walked past an abandoned parking lot near the old market, a clattering sound broke him out of his own thoughts. Ethan turned around. Just a few meters away, an elderly couple was crouched down, picking up cans and plastic bottles from a pile of trash. Ethan froze. A wave of emotion hit him, and he realized immediately. It was Evelyn and Henry, the couple he had helped at the restaurant a few days earlier. Ethan stood silently observing them for a few seconds. Both were carefully selecting each can to throw into a large plastic bag. Evelyn, wearing an old coat, had trembling hands, yet her eyes remained focused. Henry, with his thin hands, was diligently sorting the plastic bottles. That sight made Ethan's heart ache. He recalled their desperate looks at the restaurant. He had thought that helping them pay for their meal would ease their hardship, but the reality was far more cruel than he had imagined. They were still struggling to survive. Without hesitating, Ethan stepped forward. "Mr. Henry, Mrs. Evelyn." Evelyn looked up, her eyes lighting up when she recognized Ethan. A warm smile spread across her deeply lined face. "Oh my, Ethan! What a surprise to see you here." Henry wiped his hands on an old towel and nodded in greeting. "Hello, young man. How are you?" Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his trembling voice. "I'm fine, but what are you doing here?" Evelyn exchanged a glance with Henry, as if they were deciding whether to answer the question. Finally, she replied gently, "We are trying to collect a little money. Ethan, things haven't been going smoothly lately." Henry sighed and added, "You know, living in this city isn't easy for people like us." Ethan clenched his fists. He looked around at the pile of trash filled with cans and bottles that they were trying to collect. He could not imagine that an elderly couple like them had to earn a living in this way. Without much thought, Ethan knelt beside them and began picking up the cans and putting them into the bag. Evelyn gasped, "Ethan, you don't have to do that." But Ethan only smiled and continued his work. "I want to help." Henry looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "You are a good boy, Ethan. Thank you." They worked together, slowly but steadily. Ethan didn't care that his hands got dirty or that his clothes might pick up dust. Every can and every bottle he picked up made him feel that he was doing something truly meaningful. Ethan couldn't change their circumstances immediately, but he could be here, help them, at least for now. After a while, when the bag was nearly full, they stopped to take a break. Evelyn looked at Ethan, her eyes full of emotion. "Ethan, you are a good person," she said softly. "Not everyone is willing to help others like you do." Ethan shook his head. "I don't think so. I'm just doing what I can." Henry smiled gently. "You know, Ethan, when I was young, I used to believe that the world worked by simple rules, that good people would get good things and bad people would get bad things. But then I realized that life isn't that simple." He looked into the distance as if recalling something. "Evelyn and I once had a stable life, but then everything changed. Mistakes, misfortunes, and then we lost everything. But the one thing I've never lost is my faith in kindness." Evelyn nodded. "This world can be cruel, Ethan, but even in the toughest circumstances, kindness always exists. You helped us when we had no one to turn to. You can't imagine what that means." Ethan lowered his head, feeling an unfamiliar sensation fill his heart. He had always wondered if he was wrong to help them. But at that moment, he realized that no act of kindness is ever in vain. Perhaps he had lost Alice, but he had helped someone get through a terrible day. And he knew that if he had to choose again, he would do the same. Ethan looked at them, feeling deep respect in his heart. They had lost everything, yet they still held on to their belief in goodness. He took a deep breath. "I won't let you continue like this," he said, his eyes filled with determination. "I don't know what I can do, but I will find a way." Evelyn smiled and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You've already done so much, Ethan. Just knowing that you helped someone is enough." Ethan knew she was right, but he also knew that this wasn't the end. He stood up and looked up at the sky, which was slowly turning the color of sunset. He no longer felt lost, because he knew that no matter what, kindness would always have value, and he would never stop trying to spread it. Ethan's journey had only just begun. The afternoon sunlight cast long, gleaming streaks of gold on the cobblestone road. Ethan walked slowly along the familiar street, his heart still heavy with thoughts of the breakup with Alice. Everything had happened too quickly, too unexpectedly. Even though he knew he had done the right thing by helping the elderly couple, the price he had to pay was higher than he had imagined. Now, Ethan had not only lost an important relationship, but he also felt misunderstood and isolated. Yet, despite everything, there was no regret in his heart. If he had to choose again, he would do the same. Ethan's lingering thoughts were interrupted when he heard a familiar voice from inside a small cafe near the restaurant he had visited the day before. "Ethan!" He turned around and saw Lucas, an old friend of his, and also a waiter at the restaurant where the incident with the elderly couple had occurred. Lucas waved, signaling for Ethan to come in. Lucas was a gentle young man, open in nature, always with a smile on his face. He had worked at Rick's restaurant for over a year now, despite the harsh working environment and an owner who wasn't very pleasant. Ethan entered and sat down across from Lucas at a small table tucked away in a corner of the cafe. Before Ethan could say a word, Lucas leaned in and whispered, "Ethan, there's something I think you need to know." Seeing Lucas's serious expression made Ethan's heart beat faster. "What is it?" Lucas glanced around, as if afraid someone might overhear. Then he spoke in a low, trembling voice. "Do you remember the elderly couple you helped?" Ethan nodded immediately. How could he forget? Lucas took a deep breath and continued. "That night, after they left, I saw Arnold, Rick's son, and also Alice's new boyfriend, picking something up off the floor." Ethan furrowed his brow, curiosity mixed with worry. "What was it?" Lucas cleared his throat before revealing the truth. "It was the elderly couple's wallet. Ethan, they didn't lose it. Arnold picked it up, but instead of returning it, he hid it in his own pocket." Ethan felt a jolt of electricity run through his body. He sat up straight, his eyes wide. "Are you sure, Lucas?" Lucas nodded. "Absolutely. I was standing nearby and saw everything, but I couldn't do anything. You know Rick, he's hot-tempered and wouldn't hesitate to fire me if I spoke up." Ethan clenched his fists, feeling injustice welling up in his chest. Arnold, the man who always flaunted his wealth and arrogance, the one who had replaced him in Alice's heart, was a thief. Not only did he steal money, but he stole from two frail elderly people who had suffered humiliation and injustice right before his eyes. Ethan gritted his teeth, trying to contain the anger simmering inside him. "We can't let this slide." Lucas looked at him hesitantly. "Ethan, I want to help too, but if Rick finds out I'm talking about this, I could lose my job, and you know I need that job." Ethan understood. Lucas couldn't take the risk like he could. But that didn't mean Ethan would let Arnold get away with his actions. He tightened his grip. "All right, I'll find a way to expose Arnold without getting you into trouble." Lucas exhaled in relief and nodded. "Thank you, Ethan. I really appreciate that." Ethan nodded, but in his mind, he had already begun to formulate a plan. He knew that if he wanted to bring the truth to light, he would need more evidence and perhaps a bit of cunning. He spent the entire evening thinking about his next steps. He knew he couldn't simply confront Arnold and accuse him. Arnold was Rick's son, which meant he would be protected at all costs. He needed proof. He needed to find a way to make Arnold reveal the truth on his own. After a while, Ethan decided that he needed two things: a conversation with Arnold and a witness. Who could that witness be? The answer came quickly: Alice. He wasn't sure if Alice would believe him, but he knew she cared about her image. If Alice found out that her new boyfriend was a thief, would she still want to be with him? Ethan knew this would be a risky gamble, but he had no other choice. The next day, Ethan found Arnold at a cafe near the school. Arnold was sitting in a corner, looking nonchalant with an expensive cup of coffee in hand. Ethan approached, pulled out a chair and sat down opposite him. Arnold raised an eyebrow when he saw him. "Oh, look who it is. Ethan, do you have something to say to me?" Ethan didn't waste any time. "I know what you did at the restaurant." Arnold shrugged, feigning ignorance. "What did I do?" Ethan maintained his piercing gaze. "You picked up the wallet of the elderly couple and kept it for yourself." Arnold froze for a second, then immediately laughed. "Are you crazy? Ethan, do you have any proof?" Ethan smiled. "No, but do you know who does?" Arnold narrowed his eyes as Ethan's confident tone made him uneasy. Lucas saw everything. The smile on Arnold's face vanished. "And not just Lucas," Ethan continued. "I'm sure if I ask the other staff, someone will remember seeing you bending down to pick something up." Arnold bit his lip but still tried to remain calm. "Even if I did pick it up, so what? You have no proof." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe I don't, but what about Alice? What will she think when she finds out about this?" Arnold's face turned pale. "You think Alice will continue to be with a man who steals from the elderly?" Ethan challenged. Arnold clenched his fists, He knew Ethan was right. After a moment, he suddenly stood up and slammed his hand on the table. "What do you want, Ethan?" Ethan looked him straight in the eye. "I want you to return that money to the elderly couple, and I want you to do it right now." Arnold gritted his teeth, but he had no other choice. An hour later, under the witness of Ethan and Lucas, Arnold reluctantly entered the restaurant, retrieved the wallet from his jacket pocket, and returned it to Evelyn and Henry. He attempted to mutter an apology, but the look in the elderly couple's eyes said it all. As Arnold walked away, Ethan watched him, knowing that justice had been served. He had not only defended the honor of Evelyn and Henry, but he had also proven that the truth always finds a way to shine through, and he would never stop fighting for that truth. That evening, as soon as Ethan stepped into the house, he immediately sensed a heavy atmosphere enveloping the space. The small kitchen was still lit, but on the dining table, rather than the usual warm dinner, there lay a jumble of scattered papers. His mother, Isabella, sat silently with her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed in deep thought on the numbers printed on the bill. He had never seen his mother like this, tense, exhausted, as if she were struggling to hold up something far beyond her strength. "Mom," Ethan called softly, pulling out a chair to sit opposite her. Isabella looked up and gave a weak smile, though the worry in her eyes was unmistakable. "Ethan, you're home?" He glanced down at the stack of papers in front of her, the numbers blurred by the yellow light of the desk lamp. He recognized them as the utility bills, electricity, water, along with documents related to her work. A foreboding intuition gripped him. "Mom, is something wrong?" Isabella sighed, gently massaging her temples before picking up a sheet of paper and pushing it toward Ethan. He took it, skimming through it, and immediately felt his heart sink. It was a notice from his mother's company, a notice of workforce reduction. "My company is in trouble," Isabella said, her voice as soft as a passing breeze but laden with worry. "They have laid off some people, and I might be next." Those words hit Ethan hard. His mother had worked tirelessly to provide for the two of them. She had always tried to keep everything stable, even amid mounting difficulties. If she lost this job, what would they do? How would they cover living expenses, the rent, and your education? Ethan couldn't bear the thought of his mother having to shoulder everything alone. "Mom, don't worry," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll help you. I'll find a job." Isabella looked at her son with gentle yet worried eyes. "Ethan, you're still a student. I don't want you to take on too much." "But I can't just sit idly by," Ethan insisted, clenching his fists. "You did everything to raise me. Now it's my turn to help you." He spoke with all the sincerity in his heart. Yet when he set out to find a job, Ethan quickly realized that nothing was as easy as he had imagined. In the following days, Ethan devoted all his free time to job hunting. He went everywhere, reading every flyer posted on bulletin boards, scouring every recruitment website. But everywhere he went, he was met with the same rejections. "You're too young. We need someone with experience. Our work schedule isn't suitable for a student." The refusals repeated like a monotonous refrain. Ethan felt trapped. He wanted to help his mother, to ease the family's burden, but no one would give him a chance. One afternoon, after leaving a shop following yet another unsuccessful interview, Ethan stood on the sidewalk with his head bowed, letting the biting winter wind brush across his face. He felt utterly helpless, but then a thought sparked in his mind. Why did he have to find a traditional job? Why couldn't he create an opportunity for himself? Ethan recalled the articles he had read about young people earning money through freelance work. He thought of his own skills. He was good at drawing, excelled at math, and had a talent for writing. Surely he could do something with these abilities. That night, Ethan sat down at his study desk, took a sheet of paper, and began writing down ideas that could help him earn money. He couldn't wait for someone to give him an opportunity. He had to create it himself. When Ethan presented his plan to his mother, Isabella listened as her son spoke, her eyes filled with both pride and worry. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" she asked. "Juggling so many things at once will be very hard." Ethan nodded. "I'm sure. I can't let you handle everything alone." Isabella smiled. her eyes tender and full of trust. "If you're determined, I'll support you." And so, Ethan began. He designed a flyer advertising his math tutoring and homework editing services. He shared the information on social media, asking friends to pass it on to anyone in need. At the same time, he posted some of his artwork on online forums to attract customers interested in ordering a painting. At first, the responses were few. No one ordered anything immediately. But Ethan wasn't discouraged. He persisted in his promotions, continually improving his skills. And then, little by little, things began to change. A classmate needed help with an essay and asked Ethan to edit it. A local parent looking for a math tutor for her son called him. A stranger online admired one of Ethan's paintings and offered to buy it. Work began to flow in bit by bit. Ethan threw himself into his work with all the diligence and enthusiasm he had. He spent every evening after school tutoring, used his lunch breaks to paint, and burned the midnight oil editing papers. There were times when he felt exhausted, times when he was utterly drained, but each small sum of money earned filled him with overwhelming pride. One evening, when Ethan handed his mother the first money he had earned, Isabella looked at her son with eyes full of love. "Ethan, I don't know what to say," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You don't have to say anything, Mom," Ethan replied with a smile. "You did everything for me. Now I'm just trying to do the same for you." Isabella hugged Ethan tightly, and in that moment he knew he had made the right choice. Ethan had never imagined he would become a young entrepreneur. He had never thought that he could earn money from the simple skills he possessed. But most importantly, he had never imagined that one small decision, the decision to stand up and take action, could change his life and his mother's in such a profound way. And that was only the beginning. Ethan's life gradually settled into a new rhythm after months of struggling to earn an income. He had begun to build a modest financial foundation for his family. Not much, but enough to ease his mother's worries. However, no matter how well his small business developed, Ethan always felt that something was missing. It was as if an important door remained locked, waiting for him to find the key. Then, one day, fate knocked in, a way he had never expected. It was a late afternoon when Ethan was on his way home after a grueling day at work. The last rays of the sun shone down on the streets, bathing the familiar road in a peaceful pale yellow. As he passed by the old market, he heard the clanging sound of cans bumping into each other, a familiar noise that made him stop in his tracks. In a secluded corner of the parking lot, Ethan recognized two figures he could never forget: Evelyn and Henry. They were carefully sorting aluminum cans and plastic bottles from a heap of scrap. That sight made Ethan's heart ache. The two elderly individuals, bent over with age yet with eyes that still shone with perseverance and patience, stirred deep emotions within him. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan stepped forward. "Mr. Henry, Mrs. Evelyn," he called out, his voice laced with indescribable emotion. Evelyn looked up, and when she recognized him, her eyes lit up in a way that was different. Not only the joy of meeting the kind-hearted boy from before, but also something akin to hope. "Ethan, what a surprise to see you again," she said with a smile, setting down her bag of trash. Henry also nodded in greeting, his voice warm. "Young man, we didn't expect to see you here." Ethan looked at them, his feelings a tangled mix. He had thought about them a lot since the day he helped them at the restaurant, wondering if they were doing well, if their lives had improved. But now, witnessing them still struggling with collecting bottles, he couldn't help but feel sorrow. "May I help you both?" he asked without hesitation. Evelyn gave a soft laugh, glancing at Henry with an inscrutable look. Henry nodded, then turned to Ethan. "Are you sure?" Ethan nodded firmly. "Of course." He didn't hesitate to roll up his sleeves and join them in picking up the plastic cans and arranging them into bags. As they worked, they chatted about their lives. Ethan shared the challenges he had faced, how he had struggled to find work, and how he had started a small business to help his mother. Evelyn listened, occasionally nodding, her eyes observant and gentle. Henry smiled repeatedly, as if he already knew everything Ethan was saying. Then, as dusk began to settle, Henry suddenly spoke up. "Ethan, "There's something we want to tell you." He paused and looked at them with curiosity. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Evelyn took a deep breath and slowly said, "Do you remember the first time we met at the restaurant? When you helped us without asking for anything in return?" Ethan nodded. "I couldn't just stand by and watch you both be mistreated." Henry smiled, this time with a smile full of pride. "That is exactly what we needed to see." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Evelyn gently placed her hand on his shoulder, her voice filled with sincerity. "Ethan, actually, we are not homeless." He blinked, utterly shocked. "What?" Henry nodded, his eyes fixed on him seriously. "We are actually entrepreneurs. We own a large corporation specializing in real estate and philanthropy. But more than that, we are always looking for people who deserve an opportunity." Ethan's heart pounded. It felt as though he were listening to a story that couldn't possibly be real. "But why?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. "We wanted to find someone with a sincere heart. Someone who doesn't act only for personal gain, but is also willing to help others, even when there's nothing to be gained in return. We have tried many, but no one has reacted like you did." Ethan could hardly believe his ears. "So, are you saying that this was an experiment?" he asked. Henry nodded. "You passed it, Ethan. You have proven that you are truly a kind person, and that is the quality we look for in an heir." Ethan fell silent, his mind struggling to process everything he had just heard. Part of him was in shock. He had believed that Evelyn and Henry were truly impoverished, yet now they revealed that they were wealthy businessmen. But another part of him felt that somehow this was meant to be. He recalled how they had observed him during their first meeting, how they always inquired about his life, how sincerely they listened to his stories. And now they were offering him an opportunity he had never dreamed possible. "So, what do you want from me now?" Ethan asked, his voice small as he still struggled to believe it all. Evelyn looked him straight in the eye, smiling with trust. "We want you to work with us, learn how to run a business, how to manage people, and how to bring about real change. We believe you have the potential to become a leader." Ethan's mouth fell open. This was something he had never dared to dream of. A chance not only at a job, but to learn from truly experienced people, guided by those who had built a business empire. But above all, he realized one crucial thing. Everything had happened for one single reason: your kindness. You didn't help Evelyn and Henry for any personal gain. You did it simply because you believed it was the right thing to do. And that very act had opened a door that he had never imagined existed. Ethan took a deep breath, then looked up, his eyes shining with determination. "I agree." Evelyn and Henry exchanged a look, then smiled together. "Get ready, Ethan," Henry said, patting him on the shoulder. "The real journey is just beginning." Ethan embarked on his career path with the qualities of a potential leader, but he did not acquire them easily. His career was the result of years of hardship, learning from the mentors and guides who shaped his growth. Among these, the two most important names were Evelyn and Henry. Evelyn was a wise leader who devoted all her passion to the company's development. She understood the importance of upholding professional ethics and constantly taught Ethan about creativity, providing a clear vision for the future. Meanwhile, Henry was an experienced executive, skilled in managing materials, manpower, and financial resources to ensure that a business ran efficiently. Together, they formed a perfect alliance, and both confidently asserted that Ethan was the one worthy of inheriting the legacy they had built. From a talented young man still uncertain about his direction, Ethan quickly matured under the guidance of Evelyn and Henry. He learned how to develop long-term strategies, how to build a resilient team, and how to confront difficult decisions. His discretion and determination were soon proven as he gradually led important projects, investing in innovations that propelled the company to remarkable growth. However, tragedy struck when Evelyn and Henry passed away, one after the other. Their loss was a tremendous shock to Ethan. From that moment on, he felt as if an essential part of his life had vanished. He was filled with sorrow, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. Instead, Ethan resolved to continue the path that Evelyn and Henry had initiated, seeing it as a way to honor and preserve their legacy. And then came a tremendous surprise. When the will was announced, Ethan discovered that Evelyn and Henry had decided to leave their entire fortune and the company to him. This decision was not only a testament to the absolute trust they had placed in Ethan, but also a mission they entrusted to him. Ethan was now the bearer of the future of an empire. Overwhelmed with emotion, he vowed before his colleagues and friends that he would not let their legacy go to waste, but would lead the company to heights beyond their wildest dreams. That afternoon, rain fell relentlessly like a sorrowful symphony of nature, washing away the lingering wounds in the urban heart. Ethan stood by the window of his high-rise apartment, his eyes lost in the sight of raindrops descending upon the stone-paved street. He had thought he would never see Alice again, but fate once again toyed with him as she appeared unexpectedly. Alice had returned after many years apart, carrying with her apologies and unfinished dreams. She had heard that Ethan had inherited a vast fortune after his father's passing, and deep in her heart, she longed for a fresh start. Once Alice had meant everything to Ethan, a vital part of his youthful days. But then, ambition, poor choices, and growing distance had shattered that love into fragments like broken glass under the setting sun. When Alice stood before him, her deep brown eyes shining with urgency, Ethan could not help but recall old wounds. She spoke of her mistakes, of the lost days adrift, of the regrets that had weighed heavily upon her heart. But Ethan, after many years of solitude and self-reflection, had learned to see through people's true nature. He realized that Alice had not truly changed. She returned not only because of him, but also for other reasons. The safety, the wealth, the comforts she once pursued. "I can forgive you, but we cannot go back," Ethan said, his voice calm yet resolute. Those words struck like a sharp blade, severing any last hope Alice held. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, yet Ethan only offered a sad smile. He was no longer the young man he once was. He had learned how to let go. Rejecting the pull of the past, Ethan decided to use his inheritance differently. He refused to let it become a symbol of power or extravagance. Instead, he transformed it into a resource for changing the lives of others. He dedicated a large portion of his fortune to helping his mother, the woman who had nurtured him through his toughest times. Her small home was renovated so that her later years would no longer be filled with worry and scarcity. But Ethan did not stop there. He established a charitable foundation, naming it in honor of his father as a tribute. This fund aimed to assist orphaned children, the homeless, and the underprivileged who had never had the chance to alter their destinies. He ventured into the poorest neighborhoods of the city, listening intently to the stories of those often overlooked, and offered his help wholeheartedly. The company that Ethan inherited also took on a new direction. No longer solely driven by profit, the business under his leadership placed social responsibility at the forefront. Ethan initiated community support programs, created jobs for those previously abandoned by society, and invested in green projects aimed at sustainable development rather than the depletion of resources. At first, not everyone supported Ethan. The board of directors had differing opinions, and some shareholders doubted his decisions. Yet Ethan remained undeterred. He believed that the true value of a business was not measured merely by numbers, but by its impact on society. Gradually, the positive changes became evident, and people began to see Ethan in a new light. He was not only a young entrepreneur, but also a pioneer of a new business model, one that was responsible, humane, and full of hope. Ethan's life was no longer shadowed by regrets of the past. He moved forward, steadfast on the path he had chosen. As he looked toward the future, Alice's presence was no longer by his side, nor was the pain that once clung to him. For he had learned that sometimes letting go of the old is not a loss, but a way to discover oneself. That autumn, in the early days of a new chapter in his life, Ethan met Alyssa. Alyssa was a passionate volunteer, with bright eyes that seemed to hold the entire world within them. She was always at the forefront of community projects, dedicating every hour to helping those in need. In her, Ethan discovered an energy he had never imagined he craved so deeply. They met at a seminar on sustainable education, where Elisa took the stage to present how educational programs could change the lives of underprivileged children. Ethan was captivated by Elisa's sincerity and her unwavering belief in making the world a better place. They exchanged ideas, shared dreams, and quickly realized that they not only shared the same ideals, but also beat in sync with one another. In the days that followed, Ethan and Elisa spent a great deal of time together, not only working on social projects, but also exploring the hidden corners of each other's souls. They spoke of hopes, fears, and unfulfilled dreams. Ethan recounted the story of Evelyn and Henry, the ones who had laid the foundation for the path he now walked. He wanted to do something to honor them, not only in memory, but also in reality. Elisa listened with understanding in her eyes. She took Ethan's hand and said, "Then let's organize a gala, a celebration that not only honors them, but also creates an even greater impact on the community. Let's transform what they have done into a legacy that continues to spread." That idea ignited a flame within Ethan. He began planning, leveraging all the contacts and resources at his disposal. Elisa became a steadfast partner, not only assisting him with the organization, but also helping him find ways to turn the gala into an event of true significance. On the day of the gala, the hall shone under gentle golden lights. The photographs of Evelyn and Henry were displayed with reverence, accompanied by stories of their lives. Stories that were not merely recollections, but sources of inspiration. Ethan stood on the stage, his heart overflowing with emotion. He looked down at the audience, filled with faces he had encountered along his journey. Children once helped by Evelyn, families once supported by Henry, and the many individuals who had stood by Ethan over the years. He took a deep breath and began, "Today, we are not only here to honor Evelyn and Henry, great individuals who devoted their lives to helping others, but also to reflect on something even more important, the impact that each one of us can leave on this world." He spoke of how Evelyn spent every minute teaching children who could not afford an education, how Henry used his entire fortune to build shelters for the homeless. He shared his own sleepless nights when he questioned whether the path he had chosen was truly meaningful, until he realized that meaning did not lie in what he possessed, but in what he could give away. The entire auditorium fell silent, save for the deep, steady breaths of those absorbing every word. Then, an unending round of applause erupted. After the gala, Ethan stood outside the hall, gazing up at the night sky. Elisa joined him, her eyes filled with warmth. "You did it," she said softly, like a gentle autumn breeze. Ethan smiled, not out of pride, but with a profound sense of peace. He realized that success was not measured by the wealth he accumulated or the titles he earned, but by the impact he could make. He looked at Elisa. She was not only a partner and a companion, but also an essential part of his journey. Together, they had not only found each other, but had discovered a way to create something truly meaningful. From that day forward, Ethan no longer counted success in numbers. He measured it in the smiles he inspired, the lives he touched, and the values he left for future generations. And in that way, he was happy.